Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. I had a little bit of technical difficulties, but here we are, all ready for NaNoWriMo Week 3. So welcome to Week 3. Thank you for joining me today. Today, our session is really going to be about keeping up motivation, similar to what we were talking about with Week 2. But today, we're also going to discuss a little bit about what we're going to take from our NaNoWriMo journey. So if you're like me and you oftentimes have a hard time finishing your work, hopefully this will be really helpful for you. But also, if you're someone who's interested in taking your NaNoWriMo journey beyond just writing one time for the month of November, hopefully you'll find this helpful as well as we dive into learning about more writing philosophies and also thinking more about how we're going to take NaNoWriMo into the future with our writing journey. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And let's make sure. All right, and so the reason I chose this image today is that we're thinking more about our writing journey as a whole, and it is kind of not necessarily a journey to the top, but it is a journey as we climb and as we improve and get better. So first things, let's talk a little bit about what we were talking about last week as well. Like I mentioned, if you have a hard time finishing your work, hopefully this will help you out. And so let's talk a little bit about motivation. So actually, before we do that, I want to hear from you all. How is your Nano going? How are you feeling with motivation? Week 3, you're to the halfway point. So a gigantic congratulations. Feel free to put in the comments how you feel like your journey is going this week. I'll start. I was having a really tough time. If you remember back in week 2, my word count was not where I wanted it to be at all. And I was really stressed out about whether I wanted to keep my 50,000 words, whether I wanted to do a different kind of NaNoWriMo and do only 30,000. And so actually this weekend was really helpful for my journey. I decided to do what I suggested you all do and join a virtual write-in with NaNoWriMo HQ. And that actually helped me quite a lot. I had never participated in one of those before. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I should have mentioned at the beginning, make sure you watch week 2 and week 1 of this program. You don't have to, but I will be referring back to some things like the virtual write-ins that we've discussed before. So if you're confused or not sure, just make sure you go back and watch those 2 weeks as well. So I had suggested that you all do a virtual write-in, and so I decided to do one, and it was awesome. We had an interesting discussion last week about word sprints, and Regina Renee was offering up their perspective of word sprints, and I talked about mine as well and how I liked them. And it was really great because the virtual write-in that I participated in was a lot of word sprints, and they did have prompts, which Regina Renee had mentioned was helpful. And so it was really awesome because word sprints work so well for me. And I got so much writing done with that one virtual write-in. So I had found it was usually I would usually write about 500 to 900 words an hour. And with that virtual write-in, it was 1 hour, and I wrote 2,500 in that 1 hour, which was just fantastic. I was so happy that I was able to improve my word count, and it really motivated me to go further. So I'm feeling much more motivated this week. I've really figured out that there are very certain tools that help me a lot, and I'm just going to keep using those tools because if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? So that is how my journey has been going this week. But I would love to hear from you all how your halfway point is going as well. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing now, don't feel bad. Feel free to put them in the comments at any time because I'm happy to hear about it anytime you're comfortable or feel like sharing. But I hope you all are also having a better time than I as well as I am. The better time that I'm having as well. That's how I should say that. So hopefully you all are feeling better about it too and feeling more motivation. Yeah, the halfway point can be really tricky. So I'm glad we're talking more about motivation today. So you can see here, I have some ideas of motivation that you could do, mostly using the NaNoWriMo websites. So I'll actually go ahead and pull those up too, so I can show you where those would be located. Remember, if you're 18 or under and you're on the Young Writers program, things might be a little bit different for you. You might not always have the same features. So just make sure you also poke around and see everything that you might have as well to help you out. And I know we did talk a lot about motivation last week, and it's not, I don't want this to be repetitive. It's sort of like we were talking about motivation and tools to get you more into the groove of writing. And now this motivation is going to be what helps you push through that halfway point that can be really tricky and get to the end. So that's why I mentioned if you're someone that never finishes their work, hopefully this session will help you out because it will teach you how to use tools to move past the point that you're at now and break through to finish and finish strong at the end. So the first couple of things I talked about was pep talks and different motivation on the NaNoWriMo website. Let me go ahead and show you what those look like. I'm going to be doing a lot of back and forth sharing screens today, so hopefully we don't get too dizzy. Okay, so I am on the normal NaNoWriMo website right now. And there are so many cool things you can do. You could join a writing group. Here's those virtual write-ins that I was mentioning that really helped me this weekend. So you might want to try those out. We had mentioned them last week, but I wanted to show you where those were again, just because I really found it so incredibly helpful for my word count. I was really happy about that. So there's those. You can join a writing group or you can join a home region. Home region is more important when it's actually in person and you can meet up with people. But there's a lot of other options. So if you go to Writers Resources up here, you can see that there's this thing called pep talks. And this is something that I think can be really helpful to help you break through that halfway point and keep going. So here's some recent pep talks. If there's an author that you really admire, definitely check out and see if they're here. But even if it's an author you've never heard of before, these are all really fantastic talks. I've listened to a couple of them. And like I mentioned, it's just a really helpful way to think about your writing in a more cohesive way. So we're really focused on doing NaNoWriMo and really focused on making sure we make it to November and getting that word count. But again, just like all the things we've been talking about, word sprints, these pep talks, NaNoWriMo itself, those are all just tools to help your writing journey. And so what I really like about these pep talks is they talk a bit about NaNoWriMo, but it's also a lot of talk about being an author, inspiration with writing. What does it mean to be an author? How do you make your writing journey your own? How can you move from NaNoWriMo into a more cohesive writing journey? And so if you're having a hard time feeling very tunnel visioned with NaNoWriMo or feeling very stuck, this can be a great way to kind of pull out and see a comprehensive look of your writing journey and kind of see the big picture again. So if you click on one of those, most of them are going to be just reading pep talks, but I believe there are also a couple of writing ones, but I think they're really great. I'm not even the tortoise of writing, I'm the slug. And you are more than hares, you're cheetahs writing 70 miles an hour. I have to fictionalize even to talk to you. So, and then they share, some of them will pep talk you and talk you up like that and say like, oh, you're doing so great. Like, don't give up. You have so much passion. You have so much talent. The world needs to hear your story. And then they'll also oftentimes give you some helpful things like sleep at least once a week and some helpful advice and some tips that they've figured out on their writing journey as well. So I think that the pep talks are kind of ones that they're kind of buried on the NaNoWriMo website. So I think a lot of times people don't even think about it, but it can be really an awesome way to do that. So If you are on the Young Writers page, you're not going to have this pep talks page, but you could still always get to the pep talks page if you wanted to, just from the NaNoWriMo website without logging in. The other thing you could do is just look on YouTube and just look up pep talks. So if you have an author that you really admire, one of my favorite authors is Tamara Pierce. Sometimes I'll just Google interviews or talks that Tamara Pierce has given, just to get more inspiration from one of my favorite authors. And of course, on November 30th, we're having Allison Gervais as well. So that might be a great time to join in with us as well and feel motivated and learn more about her writing process and your writing journey as well. So anytime you need that, you can use these pep talks. I like them because sometimes when you look at interviews on YouTube, they're just more general. These pep talks are really authors gearing the information towards other authors. So they're speaking to you as an author. But the other talks on YouTube and stuff that you can find are also great. So I definitely think one of the best ways to keep your motivation up is to find inspiration in other authors. And it's never... I don't want it to ever be a comparison game. It's not like they're doing this way, so I have to do it this way too. But it can just be really helpful to talk about it and hear about it from someone else who understands and who also is an author and has been through that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can show you on the Young Writers website. Like I mentioned, you don't have the pep talks, but you do have something called forums on this top button right here. And this could be really helpful. For example, there's a first timers page. There's also the lounge where you can just kind of hang out and chat with people, take a break from noveling. And then this one is really awesome, critiques and feedback. So maybe you're struggling with getting through this last couple of weeks because you're kind of feeling like, I've been writing like so much and I have so many words in my word count, but I don't really know if any of them are good, or I don't know where to go from here. I'm feeling kind of stuck. This critiques and feedback page could be really helpful for you. There's a lot of other great ones too. Character Cafe, if you're having a hard time with character development, that could be good as well. Noveling tips, all of this. So all of these are really great. Like, for example, let's go to the world building and plot help. And you can see, let's go to the world building hub. That sounds interesting. This is the place to chat about world building, talk about dialects, rant about geography, and worry about timelines. So this is really awesome. It's just a message board where people will help each other out. You can get really great resources and tips from other writers. It's also helpful because sometimes you can just, similar to the pep talks, you can kind of talk with other writers and complain about timelines or rant to one another where things are going hard, when you're having a hard time, that kind of idea. So you don't have nothing on the Young Writers page. I think these forums are actually really, really awesome. So definitely use those similar to the pep talks as well. So the pep talks and the forums are really fantastic because, again, they're writers talking to other writers, to you in that kind of sense, and they'll help you both push through some of those hard spots in your novels, but it'll also help you think about your writing journey outside of NaNoWriMo. Let me show you a couple other things. I shouldn't have stopped sharing my screen. I should have stayed on that screen. Let me go back to the dashboard before I share with you. Technology today, slow internet. Okay, here we go. Young Writers Program again. I shouldn't have gone away from that, sorry. Something else that is really, really helpful that can keep you motivated is if you think of gamifying your experience. And so essentially what gamifying means is anytime you're playing a video game or a board game and you get like achievements and that kind of thing, it's really a great motivator to keep you going. So if you get an achievement and you're someone who's a completionist and you want to get all of those achievements, that can be a great way for you to continually interact with the game and to keep your motivation going. And so gamifying is really an interesting concept for things that aren't video games or board games. games, because you can essentially use that same kind of psychology to motivate yourself through the tough times in NaNoWriMo. So the gamifying element that I want to focus on for both the Young Writers Program and NaNoWriMo is badges. So on the Young Writers Program, if you scroll down, you can see these badges right here. And so if you're having a tough time and let's say you've listened to a pep talk or you found a tracker that really works, but that's just not enough, you're still struggling, I would suggest that you set yourself a challenge to collect these badges. So this can be helpful because we've been so focused on our word count the whole time, right? 50,000, 30,000, whatever. We have our tracker going. We know we need to make it to that point. It can be really easy to just narrow down and focus that way and kind of burn ourselves out. But if you think about it instead of, I have to write 50,000 words, if you think about it as, I want to collect 10 badges or I want to collect these 5 badges, it can kind of feel more like a game and feel like a fun challenge instead of a slog like it can this third and fourth week. So these are the badges. You can see we already got one badge because we started a novel, our example novel, but there's also a lot of other things. So when you hit 10% of your goal, if you've written for 5 days, you've written for 30 days, if you won NaNoWriMo, that kind of idea. So on the Young Writers Program, most of the badges are going to be percentages of your word count and then also days in a row that you've written. So the days in the row badges, if you're really tired of focusing on word count, that might be a great way to kind of change it up in your brain and use that brain psychology and say, instead of word count, I just want to get it to where I've written 5 days in a row and I've updated my word count 5 days in a row to get that badge. So that could be a great way to think about it instead and a different kind of motivator. Let me show you what the badges look like on the NaNoWriMo homepage if you're over 18. All right, so I will go back to the homepage. And here's where our badges are. So these ones are a little bit different. There are some similarities. It's going to be, instead of percentages of goal, it's going to have like 5,000 words, 25,000 words, and then also consecutive days. What else is really cool? I like this one of starting a streak. So the idea of starting a streak is just updating your word counts so many days in a row. So if you update it at least 2 days in a row, you get that kind of badge, and then you can get it for 3 days in a row and then 7 days in a row. So even if you're not hitting your word count goal, you can still be accumulating these badges and getting that kind of streak just because you're updating and consistently writing. And then let's see. This one's interesting. Update more than once in 1 day. I think that might be a new badge this year. I don't think I saw that last year. So that one could be really great if you have a long day and or if you have a day that you know you have time to write and you want a long writing day. You could break it up and write a little bit in the morning and a little bit at night and update those both times, 2 separate times in 1 day, and you could get that badge as well. There's also a place, I believe there used to be a place, I should have double checked. There used to be a place where you could give yourself your own badges. That might have been at the beginning of November. So take a look at those if you can find them. And those are funny. They're like, if you're a pantster and you just fly by the seat of your pants, you don't plan your novel at all, you can give yourself a pantster badge. Or if you're a planner, you can get a planner badge where you know you've outlined your whole book. You have your world building. You're very, very detailed before you even start writing. And then you can have the combo badge, which is the one I always have, called the planster, where you kind of planned, but you're also going to go by the seat of your pants. That's how my life goes in general, life philosophy and writing philosophy of, I'll plan as best I can, but I'm also going to fly by the seat of my pants because sometimes that's when the best things happen. So those can just be a really fun way, the badges, to kind of change your brain psychology up and keep yourself motivated through those difficult times. All right, I'm going to go back to the slides so we can talk a little bit about other motivation. All right, so we talked about the pep talks, and there's also other motivation on the NaNoWriMo websites. Sometimes, like if you're on the Young Writers Program, that little Viking will pop up and give you helpful tips and encouragement. And it also doesn't just have to be things on the NaNoWriMo websites. So I would definitely encourage you to look at YouTube, to join perhaps a writing group. Things like the website meetups are great to find a writing group. I used to have a writing group in Chicago. that I met in meetups. And it's really great to have that kind of community. Even though things are online this year, I think that we can actually still get a lot of motivation online because we don't have to have the stress of planning a time and a place and all of that to actually go and meet together. We can just meet together online, and it can be a little bit looser that way. So if you wanted to get a writing community together and actually host your own virtual write-in, that could be really, really awesome. Even if you don't want to host, just getting a writing community together online could be a really great way to keep your motivation up. I really loved my writing group because it was kind of similar to the pep talks where we could build each other up. But I also found that it was a really helpful way to get in-depth advice and tips and that kind of thing from someone because they've actually read my work and they've kind of seen the journey that I've gone on with my work. And so they could better talk to me about it and help me along with that. So a writing group can be really great because while the virtual write-ins and the pep talks are really helpful, they're kind of one-time things that aren't completely unique to your situation, whereas a writing group is kind of more of a community where you all see each other's journeys, see each other grow, see each other's works grow, and you can get more full context of the timeline of someone's writing journey, the work and all the iterations their work has gone through, and that kind of thing. So of course, don't meet in person this year, but you could meet people on meetups. You could also start a writing group on Facebook, anything like that. That could be really helpful. And if you wanted to, you could host your own virtual write-in. You really don't need much for a virtual write-in. All you really need is some kind of video software like Zoom or Google Hangouts and some information like we're going to be doing word sprints, or we're going to have a time where we discuss our character building, or we're going to be talking about this prompt, or we're going to be listening to this author talk about this. And that could be really fascinating and interesting. And don't forget, we're going to be having one of our own on November 23rd, so do not miss it. That's going to be next week. So next week from 2 to 3, we're going to have our own virtual write-in. I am so excited for that. So if none of the other tips and tricks help you, hopefully that virtual write-in will be a great goal for you to come and at least know, I've been struggling, but I want to make it to that virtual write-in on the 23rd and see how much I can get done. And hopefully it's really helpful for you as well. All right, before I go on, I just want to check and see if there are any questions, comments, feedback, ideas from talking about some motivation that's available online that kind of helps you go from learning to write and do nano to pushing through those difficult times when you can get stuck. So any questions or comments? This might be a good time for me to mention as well. I think that this year, Nano is really different for me and probably for a lot of you because of COVID and because of 2020 as an entire year. And so I found that I've had a lot of changes this year, and I'm sure a lot of people have. And it's difficult to be creative, I think, this year. It's difficult to focus on expressing yourself creatively, working on that kind of consistency that you need for NaNoWriMo and to fit writing into your daily life, because nothing is normal at all. So it's difficult to think about fitting writing into your normal daily life when no one's normal daily life looks like it used to or feels like it used to. And so I've been trying to, along with motivating myself, I think something that's really important that I didn't put on this slide is to give yourself grace and be patient with yourself and understand that NaNoWriMo is a tool to help your writing journey. It is not a judgment of who you are as a writer or your writing abilities. And especially with this year, we just all need to be patient with ourselves and to understand that things are difficult. Just everyday things are difficult, much less focusing on writing. So I think some people I've heard are having an easier time because they want to delve into that world, into a kind of fictional world and escape, and can really get engrossed in that, which is awesome. But for others of us, it's just hard to get into that creative mindset when things are so tumultuous and changing all the time. And it's just difficult if our lives aren't normal, it's difficult to have the energy and the wherewithal to like focus on creative things and fictional things as well, if you're doing a fictional work. So if you don't finish Nano this year or any year, it's okay. You are not a failure as a writer. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't focus on a writing journey or you shouldn't keep trying and working harder. That's not what it means at all. And I will actually share at this point as well that I think I've decided that I'm going to change my goal. So for the last 3 years, I think it is, I've completed NaNoWriMo with the 50,000 words for the month of November. But everything is different this year, like I mentioned. The genre I'm focusing on this year is different. The way I'm writing and the tools I'm using are different. The tracker I'm trying out is different. COVID is difficult. I'm in a new position at work, so everything is really changing. And I've decided to change my goal this year from 50,000 to 30,000 words because I took some time to evaluate, like I mentioned in week 2, and I decided that word count was just not going to be reasonable for this year. So that does not mean that I shouldn't ever try Nano again. It doesn't mean that I've failed at Nano, because if I hit that 30,000, I am still going to celebrate exactly the way I've celebrated before when I've hit 50,000. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and have a little interlude because Nano is so different this year and everything is weird this year. So please do not ever use Nano as a way to beat yourself up or to think that you haven't achieved what you needed to achieve. It's just a tool to encourage you and to get you writing more consistently. And if you take nothing else out from NaNoWriMo, the idea of just writing to write, even if you don't think it's good, even if you don't think it's going to turn into a book, I think that's the best thing you can take out of it, because as writers, we oftentimes have this urge to write, right? We have this need and this desire, and a lot of times we can push it down, we can self-edit and be too critical. So if you feel the need and the drive, just write. Write once a week, write every day, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare, it doesn't have to be a book. Just write because you enjoy writing and that's the way you express yourself, and don't hold yourself back from that. So that was a little bit of an interlude rant, but hopefully that helped you out. And I think that sometimes taking away some of those restraints and expectations can actually be the best motivation we can give ourselves. So any thoughts about that before I continue? All right, I'll go ahead and continue. But again, anytime you want to pop ideas or thoughts into the chat, they are always welcome. Okay, so the last thing that I think is really interesting and something that we'll see more when Allison Gervais joins us on November 30th is this idea of finding motivation from masters of writing or just other authors. One of the best ways I think we can improve on our writing skills is to be a good reader. And so if you read a lot, it will oftentimes help your writing skills because you can see what kind of techniques they use, what kind of voice they use, what kind of tools they use, and you can employ that in your own writing. You can figure out what writers you really like, what writers you really don't like, and kind of figure out what you do and do not like about writers, and you can employ that in your own writing. So to be a really strong writer, I think you do have to be a strong reader. But beyond just getting pep talks on the NaNoWriMo website or reading the books, it's also really interesting to hear other authors' processes and to similarly to reading their books and pulling information or techniques you like out, it's also really helpful to hear about their process and try different things and see what works for you. So I've put down on the next couple of slides, I've put down different authors and then what they talk about with their writing process and how they like to write or what they do in order to write. And if any of these sound interesting or you have an author in this that you really like, you might want to try out what kind of either what kind of schedule or ritual they have or what kind of techniques they suggest trying out. So we could learn from the masters like Stephen King. We all know Stephen King, right? Stephen King is a really interesting author to me because I find that he's very prolific without often using ghostwriters. And he has been writing for a very long time. And what I find really interesting about Stephen King is he treats writing like a 9-to-5 job, no matter what. Now, that might sound like something you absolutely do not want to do, like 9-to-5 job. No, that's too much stress. I already have one of those, anything like that. But I find it really interesting that Stephen King doesn't just view writing as a process or a creative outlet. He views it as his profession. And so he goes to work 9-to-5 every day, even on the days he doesn't want to set that kind of consistent pattern. The other thing that he does is a psychological thing that we talked about previously with setting a writing zone. And so he gets his brain ready to write because it knows every day, this is my 9-to-5 job. I get in this mode. And he does something similar to word sprints where he just writes. Even if he doesn't want to write, he'll say from 9 to 10, I'm writing no matter what. Then I'll take a break. Noon to 1, I'm writing no matter what. And he really treats it like I need to be outputting words as I'm sitting here. I need to be constantly in the process of writing, editing, revising. But the other thing he does is that psychological thing of creating a writing zone. So his brain knows we're going to work now. I shouldn't say work. It is his work. He's going to work now and he needs to be writing for these times. But he also sets certain items out and does certain things to get his brain in the mode of writing. So like we talked about previously, with getting a writing zone where your brain knows, oh, we're pulling out this notebook or we're sitting in this spot, it's time to write. He does something similar where he takes his vitamins, drinks his water, and places certain items on the table around him so his brain gets into that mode of writing. So I thought that was really interesting. A lot of times I feel authors talk a lot about inspiration or talk a lot about how the mood strikes them or what they do to get into the mood. But Stephen King doesn't so much talk about a specific mood. He just goes and writes and focuses on output of writing, which I thought was really interesting. Another master is Karen Russell. She's written a couple of books, including Orange World and Swamplandia. And she talks about something similar. So I put her with Stephen King because she talks about just keep going at it for several hours, regardless of how you feel. So it's a similar idea of she just thinks you should show up and be present and just try to write. And if you try to write in that day, it has been a success. It doesn't matter if what you're writing is going to be edited out. It doesn't matter if it's not going to turn into a book. She just focuses on being willing to show up and write is enough of a good day. So she considers a good day, I'm here, I'm able and willing to write, even if my writing isn't great. I'm still here and I'm present and I'm willing to write. And that's how she focuses on it as well. So similar to Stephen King, where it's a job, not so much as Stephen King, but it's how do I want to say it? I'm showing up to this even if I don't feel like I want to show up to it, even if I don't have the urge to show up to it right now, and I'm going to try even when I don't feel like trying. And she also talks about try to write for several hours. That's what she does at least. So if she's just willing to try at it for several hours and she's done her best, even if she had a bad day, even if she didn't feel like writing that day, she considers that a successful writing day. The next one, I will admit I included this author because this is my favorite author. This is Haruki Murakami. And yes, I did include my favorite book of his as well. So brief reader's recommendation. If you've never read Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, that is my absolute favorite book by my favorite author. Please talk to me about it if you've read it. I love talking to people about this book, and I love talking about Haruki Murakami. And so his is a bit different. He does keep a very daily routine, similar to Stephen King and Karen Russell, but he also employs a lot of athleticism into his work. He has another book called What I Talk About, or What I Mean When I Talk About Running. And it's a kind of non-biographical work talking about how athleticism and sports have a lot of the same psychological connections with writing. So he usually wakes up and he goes running And then he includes running and writing into his daily routine. And the reason he says there's similarities between athleticism and writing is because both of them, once you get to a certain point, put you into kind of a trance-like state. So for runners, once you get to a certain point in your running, you kind of go into this trance or like this runner's high, where you can just keep going and going and going, and you're kind of in this otherworldly experience where you're kind of trance-like and doing the motions. And Murakami says that he also experiences that with writing. And so if he sets his brain that way into the mode of running and having that trance-like state, he can also do that with his writing as well. And so he employs both into his daily life because both give him kind of a similar feeling, and he can draw inspiration from both as well. He also mentions the idea of writing is like physical training, which I think we can all agree with, especially with NaNoWriMo, where you're not always going to be great at it and you're not always going to want to do it. But if you consistently work at it, you'll get stronger and you'll get better, and you'll be able to get into that trance-like state more easily and pull inspiration that way. Next is Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou talks about how she used to rent a hotel room to go write in. Are you seeing a trend? I'm seeing a trend with a couple things. I'm seeing a trend with creating a writing zone. I'm seeing a trend with trying to incorporate it into a daily routine, doing it even when you don't want to build up your muscles and build up your skills. And Maya Angelou agreed with that as well. And so she had something similar to Stephen King, where she would rent a hotel room because she didn't feel like she could write where her home was, and she needed to feel like she was going to work. So she needed to have like a commute, and she needed to have a separate location where her writing was versus her home life. So I thought that was really fascinating. She would actually feel like she's going to work so that she could really focus on her writing and feel like writing was her work and was not intersecting with her home life or her home environment, which I thought was really fascinating, especially during times of COVID when a lot of people are working online. It's easy to see how sometimes when you combine work and home environments, it can get a little bit muddy, and it can be difficult to separate those out and to either focus on work when you need to focus on work, or not focus on work and be at home when you need to be at home. So it's interesting that she used to actually physically rent a hotel room and go there in order to allow herself to write. She also always kept a very strict schedule. So always made sure she got to that hotel room when she needed to, kept a strict writing schedule, and then also a strict schedule to go home, similar to a 9-to-5, like Stephen King also mentioned. Julio Diaz. Julio Diaz I included because he is a bit of a wild card, and he might be making us feel a bit better. So a lot of the trends that I was noticing in famous authors and successful authors, beyond just setting a strict schedule or treating it like a job, is a lot of them are morning people. I love Haruki Murakami's work. Waking up at 5 a.m. to go for a jog sounds like absolute torture to me, even though that's what he likes to do. And so I wanted to include Julio Diaz because not every successful or prolific or famous author is going to have the same thing. You can see a lot of similarities, but Julio Diaz has a much more relaxed routine. And so he said, writing is kind of who I am. It's a part of me. And so I don't really need to treat it like a separate entity from the rest of my life. It kind of comes out of, as I live my life, it kind of comes out of that. So he mentioned he'll be at home. Sometimes he watches TV. Sometimes he listens to music. He kind of writes when the mood strikes him. And obviously, in order to be a published writer, you do have to put a lot of time and effort into writing. But he has a less strict schedule and a less strict way of going about things. So it's still his job, of course, but he'll do it, in between running the dishes, watching TV, and kind of editing at the same time. So it's not one size fits all. It's not, if you're going to be a famous author, you have to get up at 5 a.m. and you have to write for 3 hours, and then you have to, infuse it into your daily life in all these strict ways, and you have to quit your job so you can do a 9-to-5. It's not like that at all. It's just dependent on your style and what you want. So maybe try a more relaxed routine like Julio Diaz, and try listening to some music while you write at home. And if you're like, this is not working at all, you could try something a little bit stricter. But I wanted to include him because we had a lot of people who were very morning people and very strict about their work and very exacting in their timeline. And not everyone is like that. You don't have to be like that as a writer. And then I included E.B. White, who is best known for Charlotte's Web, because I think what he says about writing is the most helpful. So we've been talking about a lot of different techniques. We've been talking about a lot of different philosophies and ways that writers feel like inspiration strikes or feels like if they're going to get their writing in, they just have to do it even if they don't want to. But I think what E.B. White says about writing is the most helpful, regardless of whether you want to try what Stephen King does, you want to try your own thing, you vibe with Julio Diaz and watching TV and writing. What E.B. White says is most helpful. And that is, this is a direct quote, "A writer who waits for ideal conditions under which to work will die without putting a word on paper." So what do you all think of that? I'm going to grab some water while you all let me know. And I can go ahead and read it again. I'll read it again because I feel like it's very impactful. "A writer who waits for ideal conditions under which to work will die without putting a word on paper." So it's really helpful to get pep talks. It's really helpful to think about what prolific authors do and try some of their techniques to see if they help you. But most importantly, if you wait for those ideal conditions, you will never write. If you wait and you say, well, I need to quit my job so I can go swimming every morning and then come back and get a really strict schedule, and I need to make sure that I figure out a way to get the kids out of the house, and I need to have my own office to work, and I need to make sure I have this kind of computer or this kind of pen, and I need to do X, Y, and Z, you will never actually write. And that's why I included this, because I think that's the most important thing. Is we like to keep it very convoluted in our brains and think that we have to do things a certain way and we have to try things a specific way. And well, Stephen King does it this way, so that has to be the way to do it. But there's no one way to write, and there's no one way to be a writer. J.K. Rowling wrote her books, on a train on a piece of paper. Some authors sit down and write an entire draft of a book in one sitting. All of those are completely valid and okay ways to do things. And if you wait until you have the perfect computer, or you have the perfect place to do your writing, or you have the perfect story idea, you're just going to keep yourself from actually being a writer. And being a writer just means writing. It does not have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be an amazing New York Times bestseller. You just have to write. So I wanted to leave you with that before we went on, because sometimes the best motivation can just be to remember that you enjoy writing and it's a way to express yourself, and that can be enough to keep you going. To keep you going. So I also liked this quote because I used to be someone who thought, I'm going to be a writer, but if I'm going to be a writer, I have to be a published author and I have to make the New York Times bestseller list. And as a kid, it's great to have goals, and it's never bad to have goals and aspirations to push yourself and to keep improving. But if those goals stop you from actually writing and actually doing what you would like and expressing yourself, then they should just be thrown away. And I've gotten to that point now where I realize I don't need to be on the New York Times bestseller list. That's so silly. Like, who cares if I'm on a list? I'm an author. I enjoy writing. I enjoy creating worlds and communicating with written word. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter if anyone likes my books. It doesn't matter if I get on a bestsellers list someday. It would be a wonderful goal to get onto the bestsellers list someday. It'd be a great achievement, but I'm not going to let that goal stop me from actually being a writer. All right, that was some heavy stuff. Oh, and I had to include the credits. That's where all my images for the books and the authors came from. So that's some heavy stuff. Let us take a break from all that, because that was a lot. And I want to hear from you all. I want to hear how you're doing with NaNoWriMo so far, and what other things you can think of, or things that you've tried to keep your motivation up through this third week. No one else wants to share? I already shared how my nano was going. That's all right if you don't want to share yet. I'll mention a couple other things I've thought of to keep my motivation up. First of all, that virtual write-in was so awesome. I'm so glad I joined that because I definitely think that's going to be the tool in my back pocket that I pull out whenever I need. So I'm really happy that I figured that out, but I've thought of a couple other things. The first thing is I've thought about starting backwards with my stories, and I'm doing a collection of short stories. So you could also do this if you were writing a longer story or an autobiography, anything nonfiction, but I'm thinking of starting at the end and then writing and meeting in the middle. So I have some short stories where I've begun or I kind of know the general premise or outlines, but I haven't actually written them yet. So I'm thinking, because I'm stuck especially on this one where I've written to the middle and it's just like, I hate middles. Middles are so hard to write. So I'm thinking I should start backwards and meet myself up in the middle and then kind of combine the beginning that I've already written and write from the end up and see where I can meet myself in the middle. And that could also be interesting even if I haven't written the beginning for another one. I'm just thinking about starting out a story and just writing the whole story from beginning to end. I'm interested to see if it will be like a normal story where I've written it from the end to the beginning, but it ends up being a story from beginning to end. Or if I read it from the end to the beginning, is that how the actual story is going to be read as well, where the reader goes kind of back in time with me as well and reads the end to the beginning? So I think that could be really interesting and fun to kind of play with timeline and play with all that, because it's easy to think, well, I need to be in this exact outline and I need to go once upon a time and then end with, so it could be fun to kind of play with that and play with the outline and see what happens if I flip it on its head and do it the other way. Anyone else want to share? I have one other one, but I don't want to take away from anyone else who's wanting to share. Okay, the other one is I'm thinking about doing kind of a pie chart, just like I'm doing markers with making a pie chart and separating out the pie chart by word count. And when I get to a certain word count, filling it in like a tracker, but then also having a reward associated with that. So I'm giving myself miniature rewards up to the big reward of hitting my word count. So a miniature reward could be something like buying a book that I really want, or giving myself a spa time and doing my nails, or even something simple like I get to watch 15 minutes of cat videos because I love cats. So I think that could be a good way to feel like I don't just have this one end goal that I have to get to that feels so far away, but I can actually get these miniature rewards along the way and kind of build up my motivation that way and break it up into more attainable parts. So I'm thinking of doing that as well. Anyone else? All right, well, hopefully you got some ideas from some authors, from some motivation online, or from me. I'll let you know how that tracker goes with giving myself miniature things. You could also do it where, I just thought of this, you could do it where it's a circle that you fill it in per word count, but you could also fill in spots on the circle when you do something like read a pep talk on the NaNoWriMo website or join a virtual write-in, something like that. That could be a good way that you're not just tracking word count, but you're also tracking other tools and ways that you can improve as a writer. So that could be really interesting. All right, well, if no one else has anything, again, feel free to put it in anytime. Let us know how your NaNoWriMo is going. I should mention, here's my number. I wrote it down for you. So I'm at 13,236. Again, a lot less than I would be with normal NaNoWriMo. A lot less than I have been in the past with the 50,000, but I'm actually really, really happy with this word count and how much I improved, especially with the virtual write-in. So this is less than it should be, but I'm actually really, really happy about this amount this week. So especially with changing my goal as well. I'm actually really proud of that. So if you want to share as well where you are in your word count, please do that in the comments as well. And let us know how you're doing with Nano. All right, just a couple more things. One other thing that can really help with keeping your motivation up, and something that I think can really help with your writing journey, is to read books about writing. So we talked about being a good writer means you're being a good reader, and that's one of the best ways to improve your writing skills and improve along your writing journey and keep your journey going. But another way is to read books about writing. So these are my 3 favorite books about writing. Sorry, my throat is so dry today. And so I would suggest, if you want to read any of these, that they could really, really help you, especially help you go from NaNoWriMo to pushing through and actually talking and thinking about your writing journey as a whole. So my 3 favorites are Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. Especially if you're a new writer, I would suggest that one first. That one's a fantastic book. I reread it all the time, and it just has so many ideas and techniques and ways to inspire you and push you past NaNoWriMo into thinking about how you want to continue your writing journey. The other one is by Stephen King, and it's on writing the memoir of the craft. And then Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. And Anne Lamott has written a couple other things. So has Natalie Goldberg. Obviously, Stephen King's written other things, but Natalie Goldberg and Anne Lamott have written other things specifically about writing that I think are really helpful as well. So I would suggest writing down the bones for your first one, especially if you're a beginning writer, but any of these are fantastic. And all of these are available through Pueblo County Library. So you can get print copies of all of these. And Writing Down the Bones and Bird by Bird are also available as ebooks and as audiobooks online. So however you prefer, Stephen King's is only in print, but you can get that. But the other 2 audiobooks, print, ebooks, whatever you want. So search for these in our catalog and you can check them out that way and let me know what you think of them. Come back to this one, or actually come back in the write-in for the write-in next week and let me know what you thought about them if you were able to read some chunks of them. So I hope those really help you as well. I find that they help. I usually read, especially Writing Down the Bones, before NaNoWriMo, but I also think that they're really helpful after NaNoWriMo. You'll be like, I did it, and you'll feel so good, but then you'll get into kind of a slump of like, okay, the holidays are coming up, there's so much happening, I need to get through it. And then in January, you might think, I did that NaNoWriMo thing, but I haven't really done anything more out of it. And so these books can really be helpful to get you out of that writing slump and get you back onto writing and either editing your NaNoWriMo project or continuing your writing journey, whatever that looks like for you. So kind of use those as a bridge to get you past NaNoWriMo and into the rest of your writing journey as a whole. Any questions about these books? Other book suggestions? That would be fantastic. Other books that have helped you on your writing journey? Yes. Vicky Lopez says Bird by Bird is a great one. I agree, it is great. Anne Lamott has a great way of talking about things and expressing things without making you feel bad, without making you feel guilty or telling you should be a certain way. Both of them are, all 3 of them are great, but I agree Bird by Bird is great. All right. And the last thing I have, let me stop sharing that, is a reminder. So Vicky says they haven't read the other 2, but definitely check them out. Yes. And Vicky, I don't know if you were here before, but I'll mention again, all 3 of those books are available through our catalog, through Pueblo County Library catalog. So the Stephen King one is print only. The other 2 are print, and we also have ebooks and audiobooks, virtual online audiobooks of those 2. So no need to have to buy them. You can get them all through our library as well. So yeah, good. I'm glad you liked those suggestions. If you have any other ones, feel free to put them in. Or if you think of any or you read the ones I suggested, definitely share that with us during the virtual write-in. All right, so the last thing I have today is just a reminder about our Kits to Go. We still have about 6 of these left, so we do have a couple left, but they are going quickly. So I included some things in them that help motivation, so that's why I think they're important to talk about this week. Some delicious snacks, a tumbler. This one has cider. We also have cocoa, a notebook, and we also have some prompt lists as well. So if you're having a hard time and you want to do word sprints or something like that, some of the prompts on our prompt list will really help you out with that too. So don't forget about these. Come pick them up. You can call us at 719-562-5680 and ask for one of them, and we can put it on hold for you, or you can just pop by and ask for one of them then. So don't forget about these. They'll be available through the end of November. But I know personally, after the difficulty I had and how much better my week is going, I think I'll have to treat myself to my cocoa and mine. So don't forget about the kits, and don't forget about everything else, the badges, the pep talks, and don't forget about our virtual write-in coming up next week, okay? So I will see you all next week from 2 to 3 for our virtual write-in. Get ready, grab your cocoa, grab everything, get settled in for the 23rd because we're going to be doing an hour-long virtual write-in. And for that, we'll be talking about some mindfulness exercises. We'll talk more about taking our NaNoWriMo experience and how we're going to integrate that into a larger writing journey. And we'll be doing lots of word sprints. All right. So I will see you all next week for a virtual write-in. Also, don't forget, we also have Allison Gervais coming on the 30th to chat with us more. So that'll be really exciting because it'll be like our own little pep talk that we'll have together. All right, I'll see you all next week. Happy writing and have a great writing week.